I'm Tom Hartman in Washington, D.C., and here's what's coming up tonight on The Big Picture. Donald Trump has promised to be tough on crime by waging a ruthless, his word, war on drugs. Are Trump and Jeff Sessions gearing up to come for you and your legal pot? Find out in just a moment. And Trump aide Stephen Miller made his rounds on the Sunday morning news shows to declare that huge numbers of people voted illegally and that Trump will not be questioned. Is the Republican Party about to unveil a national voter suppression program? We'll be talking about that and more in tonight's Progressive Roundtable. You need to know this. With Jeff Sessions now officially leading the Justice Department, Donald Trump has set the stage for the administration to, quote, restore safety in America by getting tough on crime, especially drugs.
I've been here 2 weeks. I've met a lot of law enforcement officials. Yesterday brought them into the Oval Office. I asked a group, what impact do drugs have in terms of a percentage on crime? Said 75 to 80%. It's pretty sad. We're going to stop the drugs from pouring in. We're going to stop those drugs from poisoning our youth, from poisoning our people. We're going to be ruthless in that fight. We have no choice.
Alternate contributor Philip Smith recently penned an article bluntly titled, Trump Goes Full Nixon on Law and Order Executive Orders, Vows Ruthless War on Drugs and Crime. But as Nixon's domestic policy advisor and Watergate co-conspirator John Ehrlichman later admitted, Nixon's drug war was never about drugs. It was about destroying Nixon's enemies. Ehrlichman told Dan Baum in 1994, the Nixon White House knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did. Since Nixon, though, a lot has changed. 28 states and the District of Columbia have already legalized marijuana in some form, and more are following suit. So will the Trump administration respect the 10th Amendment and embrace the budding industry across the country? Or is it just a matter of time until Jeff, good people don't smoke marijuana Sessions, decides to disrupt your community and comes after your pot? Let's ask Lieutenant Commander Diane Goldstein, Executive Board Member of the Law Enforcement Action Partnership, LEAP. Diane, welcome.
Welcome, Tom, or I should say thank you, Tom, for welcoming me.
You're welcome. Glad to have you with us. Diane, first let's take a big picture view. What are your thoughts on what we've seen so far from the administration in terms of getting tough on crime in a broad sense?
You know, it's so interesting that this week, law enforcement leaders to reduce crime and incarceration actually released a report that addresses some of these issues that the new administration is taking, and it cites evidence, empirical-based evidence that shows that getting tougher on crime is not what's going to work, that what we need to do is introduce programs that prevent substance abuse, that help rehabilitate prisoners, that invest money in education and mental health facilities. And so I think that there's going to be a pushback on some of the administration's policies, and we have the evidence to back it. Now, does that mean that the Attorney General is going to try to do a ruthless war on drugs? Absolutely, but I think it's going to fail, just like the last almost 50 years of our tough on drugs mentality has. A wall is not going to stop drugs from coming into the United States. We need to look to decriminalization, to treating drugs as a public health issue, similar to like Switzerland has done with heroin-assisted program, where they reduce property crime by almost 80% by initiating a heroin-assisted treatment harm reduction type of program.
Yeah, I believe the same thing happened in the UK before Margaret Thatcher came in, and it cut street crime dramatically. Considering that more than half of our country, of the United States, has legalized marijuana in some way, and considering that Colorado sold $1.3 billion of marijuana products just last year, do you think there's any way that the Trump administration could effectively stop the momentum for legalization, or is it much more likely that a federal crackdown on marijuana will be an expensive failure?
I think it's going to be an expensive failure, and quite frankly, for those reasons that we've now seen what a controlled and regulated market can do. And what we're going to see is, like, for example, in California, is our newly elected state attorney general said that he will fight the Trump administration if they try to prevent the rollout of our medical marijuana and our adult consumption industry. And so what we have to remember is that the federal government basically uses fiscal incentives to get local and state law enforcement to do their bidding. And so when there's already going to be pushback from our own law enforcement leaders relative to some of these issues, I think it will be an expensive failure, and I don't think that the federal government has the resources relative to federal police officers or FBI agents or DEA agents to come in and do this.
Why does it seem that some police departments are so enthusiastic about supporting the war on drugs? Are these departments simply afraid to lose the federal funding that supports the war on drugs?
I think that a lot of law enforcement agencies fail to admit the failure of the drug war because of the moral and the stigmatization of drug users, and that they feel that they've been engaged in this, 45, almost 50-year drug war, and that to say that it's not working is a sign of failure rather than being able to be insightful and say, look, this isn't reducing drug consumption. This isn't doing what we thought it was going to do. We need to look at other alternatives, which is what I love about this report by law enforcement leaders, is it talks about shifting the paradigm into other issues, and that focusing on low-level nonviolent offenders has been a failed strategy. What we have to remember is only about 2 to 3% of all federal grants go to the reduction of violent crime. And so the Trump administration is threatening to end the COPS program, the community-based policing program. And those, in fact, are the programs that we should be propping up, not more tough on crime, systems as usual, failed response.
As a former law enforcement officer, do you have any idea what Trump is imagining when he says he will be, to use his word, ruthless? I mean, does this simply mean he'll be simply arresting more people, or could this even be more extreme, like in the Philippines, where President Duterte is actually hiring death squads? They've assassinated over 7,000 people now.
Well, I still have faith in the American judicial system and in our government that we would never allow the violation of American civil rights in that fashion as Duterte is currently doing. And so I think what he is, and and I can't guess what he's thinking, but I think that the advice that he's getting is from diehard drug warriors who believe that arresting our way out of drug use is the only solution, rather than recognizing that it's been an extreme failure.
Why has the war on drugs in the United States been such a failure, and why has it been so difficult to bring that war on drugs to an end?
I think fiscal incentives from the federal government. You have federal civil asset forfeiture in one of the recent meetings with the administration and the National Sheriff's Association is we saw the discussion of civil asset forfeiture reform, where the president made a comment about destroying a senator's career because he had introduced reform. And so it's really interesting is surprisingly there is a strong bipartisan support for criminal justice reform right now, for civil asset forfeiture reform, for respecting states' rights around the issue of both medical and adult consumption marijuana. And so I think we as policy reformers need to continue to work with people who we can meet at their level. So, we know that the states are pushing back on the issue of civil asset forfeiture reform. In California, we signed a great bill, and recently I think that Florida did as well. There's a bill that was signed in Nebraska. And so just like medical and adult consumption marijuana, it's going to take the states to push back on federal intervention into our policies.
Yeah. So often this issue is characterized as a liberal-conservative divide, like liberals are, hey, let's have all the pot we want, and conservatives are like, no way. But the things that you're talking about, they reduce harm, They reduce the expense to the government. They reduce the destruction of lives. It seems like either you could argue that those are both liberal and conservative positions, or that this transcends either one. Your thoughts?
I think it transcends either one. I mean, you know, interesting enough is I'm doing work with the Charles Koch Institute, who's doing some significant criminal justice reform, who supports civil asset forfeiture reform, who has helped fund public defender's office to support all American civil liberties. And, you know, as I've done work with the Drug Policy Alliance and the ACLU and organizations that understand that in order to make our country better, we have to reduce the impact of the criminal justice systems in our community. And, you know, we really need to redefine what public safety means. I think we've abdicated control to law enforcement and the DAs instead of looking at it holistically, that the criminal justice system is the last piece in making our communities safe. Mental health, good education, infrastructure, jobs, public health will do much more to prevent crime than police do.
Diane Goldstein, thanks so much for being with us tonight, Diane.
Always, Tom, my pleasure. Hope to be back soon.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Coming up, the Trump administration is still claiming that millions of people voted illegally, and the Kansas Secretary of State Chris Kobach is going to, quote, fix the problem. But isn't this just a shallow excuse to throw millions of registered voters, particularly poor and minority voters, off the voter rolls? More on that after the break.
We are in US-led wars throughout the region between Afghanistan and Mali, and we kill people by thousands, and we are upset when they try to save their life and come to us.
Here's what people have been saying about Redacted tonight.
Give it to us.
Redacted is full-on awesome. The only show I go out of my way to watch every week. It really packs a punch. Lee Camp is the John Oliver of RT America.
They do have the same accent.
Hey, we are apparently better than boobs.
Nothing's better than boobs.
You see, people you've never heard of love Redacted tonight. The president of the World Bank, though, hates it.
He doesn't really have any taste.
Seriously, he sent us an email.
Arturo promises his mother to find out where the money is.
Very good question.
He goes on a journey to meet some smart people to enlighten him.
When you learn about it, something happens. You get mad, you get furious, you get angry, and you begin to realize we have to change this. We have to protest this.
What does he find out?
Los mayores problemas que hoy existen en nuestro país no son económicos, son políticos.
A story not as comic as it may seem. Will Arturo finally say, I know where the money is, Mum?
They're the war hawks selling you on the idea that dropping bombs brings peace, to the chicken hawks forcing you to fight in the battles that they start.
The news hawks try to tell you that celebrity gossip and tabloid murder trials are the most important news of the day.
While the hawks of advertising tell you that you are not cool enough unless you buy their product.
Watching the hawks. Watching the hawks.
These are the hawks that we, along with our audience, will be watching.
Welcome back to The Big Picture. White House advisor Stephen Miller took to the Sunday morning news shows to answer questions, including everything from North Korea's ballistic test to the Ninth Circuit ruling putting a stay on Trump's Muslim ban. Unsurprisingly, Miller was hostile and even dismissive of the various hosts and their questions, and he was especially upset about what he called judicial supremacy.
Well, I think that it's been an important reminder to all Americans that we have a judiciary that has taken far too much power and become, in many cases, a supreme branch of government. One unelected judge in Seattle cannot remake laws for the entire country.
Miller then went on to make a frightening declaration about the administration's authoritarian intentions going forward.
The end result of this, though, is that our opponents, the media, and the whole world will soon see, as we begin to take further actions, that the powers of the president to protect our country are very substantial and will not be questioned.
Based on what Stephen Miller told John Dickerson, is this feud with the court only the beginning of Trump's executive overreach? And what can the left do to block or slow down Trump's attempts to consolidate power in the executive branch? Let's ask tonight's Progressive Roundtable. With me for tonight's Progressive Roundtable are Valerie Irvin, Senior Advisor for the Working Families Party, and Kimon Freeman, Host and Program Director for WEAC Radio and a member of Black Lives Matter DC. And thank you both for being back with us. Great to have you both. So based on what we've seen, is this feud with the court only the beginning of Trump's overreach? And what can the left do to block or slow down some of this train going down the road here? Kimon, your thoughts?
Well, this is the beginning of fascism, despotism, I would even say. You know, they are protesting the checks and balances of the system that they're supposed to swore to protect and uphold. But the Washington Post Express, a propaganda newspaper here in the nation's capital, he's quoted, Stephen Miller is quoted saying that he feels that he's representing an oppressed political minority. And I think that what he's referring to is the alt-right. In
other words, white nationalists and racists?
Exactly. There's a lot of coded language still being flipped around here, but I think we are proud members of the opposition party, and I think that this is going to come to a head, and we're going to see some changes, maybe, in our lifetime that we actually deserve.
Yeah. Valerie, your thoughts on this?
These are very scary people. I can tell you that from the Working Families Party perspective, that the pushback that the Trump administration is getting is so huge and growing and roiling up in every city across the country that even the spineless Democrats are having to grow a spine and stand up and start to fight back. And I think we're at the very beginning of a populist movement of our own. It seems to me that these people that are working in the White House for the Trump really never opened a history book because they don't understand the separation of powers and that the president is not the emperor. Yeah. And this guy, Steve Miller, pretty scary. I thought Bannon was scary, but like the people that he's put into the White House are really people that we should fear, and that there should be a real strong pushback from most Americans about what's happening.
And yet one of the arguments that is being made on behalf of the White House and on behalf of, I'm reluctant to even call these people conservatives. It doesn't seem to be a governing philosophy other than I-Cloudius. Yeah, it's autocracy or something. Is that the more people who come out and demonstrate, the more people push back, the more his base consolidates in support of him, and the more they dig their feet in. And this is actually strengthening him within the White House and within the Republican Party. Thoughts on that?
Well, it's the circling of the wagons, but is definitely not expanding his base. This is, I said before many times in the show, this is the last stand of white supremacy in my opinion. This is a wounded animal, and they've become even more dangerous at that state. So I think that this is just a confirmation of just how desperate these people are, and the results are going to speak for themselves.
Yeah, last stand, it's going to be a...
Yeah, I just wanted to back up something that you just said. I think with Jefferson Beauregard as the new Attorney General, I think that really was the red meat to the alt-right to really begin to sort of like dig deeper into this whole lie they're perpetrating now about voter fraud and what that's going to do to sort of really upend democracy even more. There is so much going on in such quick time that it's really hard to get your head around all of it.
Yeah, well, you know, with the Marion Three, Jeff Sessions tried to put 3 people in prison for 100 years each for, quote, voter fraud in 1984 because they were delivering absentee ballots to disabled, elderly African Americans in Alabama, which apparently
it's a crime
worthy of 100 years in jail. It's I mean, that's actually what Coretta Scott King's letter was about,
Yes.
that Elizabeth Warren got shut down over talking about. Meanwhile, during his Sunday circuit, Stephen Miller also baselessly promoted the idea that rampant voter fraud cost Trump the popular vote in certain states, such as New Hampshire.
George, it is a fact, and you will not deny it, that there are massive numbers of non-citizens in this country who are registered to vote. That is a scandal. We should stop the presses, and as a country, we should be aghast about the fact that you have people who have no right to vote in this country, registered to vote, canceling out the franchise of lawful citizens of this country.
But as Greg Palast has documented so well for Rolling Stone and in the documentary The Best Democracy Money Can Buy, citizens who are losing their voting franchise aren't losing them to non-citizens voting as dead people. They're losing them to Republican secretaries of state working with Kansas Secretary of State Chris Kobach to throw millions of registered voters off the voter rolls. But even voters in states that aren't Republican-controlled may be soon seeing their voting rights under attack. Earlier today, Chris Kobach told the hosts of Fox and Friends that he's now advising Trump how to combat voter fraud at the national level. Does that mean Kobach will soon be the mastermind of a nationwide voter disenfranchisement campaign under the big lie that massive numbers of non-citizens are voting and stealing our elections? I mean, is this like a massive reboot of Jim Crow?
It's a false flag. It's a red herring. It is smoke and mirrors. The fact that you're referring to voter fraud, a handful of cases that we do know of, and most of them have been for Republicans, by the way, in as many decades, that should be a national crisis. But the purging of millions doesn't hit their radar, because that's their target, and that's the purpose of those laws that we send all around this country.
Yeah, it seems to me that whenever they come out and tell these lies, that it's not, that the actual purpose of this is to set up legislative responses.
Right, but I think it's also a really interesting time, because if you watched the Grammys last night, what we're seeing is that artists are becoming real messengers of our movement. At the level that we haven't seen since maybe Vietnam and the civil rights movement. And I think they're barking up the wrong tree here. Right now, everybody's like feeling a lot of anxiety about what's going to happen, but every day people are marching in the streets and saying no more. And the people that we sent to Washington to represent us are having to stand up and be counted in the halls of Congress. I think this is a really interesting moment, and if we can turn the corner on this, in 2018, we will see more people voting than ever before.
Well, this is my concern, is that they're looking at 2018 and they're saying, the incumbent party, the party in power, always gets massacred during midterm elections, and they don't want to lose the Senate, they don't want to lose control of the House, and both of those things I think are on the table right now. So what do? Well, they knocked over 1 million people off the voting rolls in the last election, just prior to the election, and we've seen this going on for a long, long time. I mean, famously in 2000, when Jeb Bush ordered Katherine Harris to knock 80,000 African Americans off the voting rolls in Florida, just in time for his brother to come within 500 votes of stealing the election. So it seems to me that they know, that the Republican Party knows that they will not win in 2018 unless they can disenfranchise at least several millions of people. And I think that's what they're setting up here. Do you guys think I'm an alarmist?
I think they've done it. I just think it's a continuation, and I think, as you said, full steam ahead to do more. But they have to continue to stay on their attack with this. Otherwise, it would further expose their hands for what the real agenda is.
Well, you said something earlier about their base. I think that their base is going to shrink, because I think that Trump is focusing on things that the base doesn't really want him to focus on. And he may not have a choice. They want him to grow the economy. Where are our jobs? And he's now being focused on, let's fight the judiciary. Let's get into a war on voting rights. And all these things are taking him away from what he really sort of became the president to do. And while that's all going on, we're building in the streets. And so I think the clash is going to be really interesting.
Yeah, and already is in many ways. After a week of protests back in his home district, Utah Republican and House Oversight Chair Jason Chaffetz is back in D.C. promoting big government conservatism. Under Chaffetz, the House Oversight Committee will vote on a resolution to block D.C.'s Death with Dignity law, which is set to go into effect as soon as February 20th. Chaffetz calls the law misguided and immoral. If the law goes into effect, D.C. would join 5 other states that have laws to allow terminally ill patients to end their lives with a doctor's help. The good news for D.C. residents is that even if the Oversight Committee votes to block the bill, it would still have to pass the Senate, which isn't likely to take this up anytime soon. But at its core, isn't death with dignity an issue of individual choice and the ability to choose whether or not to be buried with medical costs or to die in excruciating pain? And beyond that, why do Republicans promote local control of everything until it comes time for the nation's capital to govern itself? It seems like, you know, the hypocrisy alarm should be going full blast. We got about a minute and a half here.
Well, Jason Chaffetz, I just want to say that he's a strange animal. He actually did a wonderful job on the attack of the Flint water crisis, even though that hasn't actually taken care of the problem. People still have dirty water there. But our mayor, Muriel Bowser, they had a big campaign today, and it was saying the best thing that they can do for D.C. is leave us alone. The Republicans have a tradition of always using D.C. as kind of their guinea pig, and to throw their weight around and things they would never get away with in their home state because we have no taxation or representation right here in D.C.
Nobody can throw them out from here, Valerie.
He should take care of Utah. He's not doing so well at home. Jason Chaffetz, good luck to you in your next cycle.
Yeah, you think he's going to get primaried? You think that a Democrat is going to run against him and beat him?
I think he'll get primaried. Even Republicans are furious with him over Obamacare. So it's going to get interesting out there. So Jason Chaffetz should just stay in his home state of Utah and take care of business.
You mean Republicans are furious with Chaffetz for trying to destroy Obamacare?
Yes. If you listen to his town hall meeting, many of the people who were addressing him at his town hall meeting were Republicans, and they were white in Utah, mostly white state, really upset about what's going to become of them and what's the replacement to Obamacare, which they don't have.
Remarkable. Valerie, Kimon, great having you both with us tonight.
For this ad, I just want to make sure your listeners know that D.C. does not have a vote in Congress.
You got it. You got it. And now the big picture fact of the day. Produce prices in Europe are skyrocketing right now due to climate change. While the Murcia region in Spain normally supplies 80% of Europe's fresh produce during this time of year, only 30% of Murcia's growing fields are usable after the region saw the worst rains it's seen in 30 years. At the same time, while Italy normally exports vegetables during this time of year, a cold snap in that country has forced them to import vegetables, driving up produce prices across Europe even more. And that's the way it is tonight. And don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. Get out there, get active, tag, you're it.